Hello everybody, Ben Coley here. It's April the 18th, 2015. And we start our show off today with a funny story from my past. And then we're going to talk about something a little more serious, campaign reform. Because boy, we really need a big dose of campaign reform. I mean, don't you agree?
Yes.
Don't we all agree that we need campaign reform? Yes.
Yes.
I mean, this Republican Democrat thing, and it's just getting old, and it's not helping us, folks. It just isn't helping us. It's bringing us down. The 21st century is here. It's time to move forward and come up with some new ideas. And I've got a new way of doing things. I've got several ideas, but before we get serious here, let's just talk about something funny and try to forget about all the problems that we have in this country right now that can be fixed so easily once I get my hands on the reins. I'm going to tell you a funny story just to prove my inventiveness and my creativity from the past. It's a funny story. My grandmother, when she came from Italy, I asked her what she did for a living, because she had a job, and she bought a triplex house in Philadelphia, and it was three apartments, one on top of the other, and she lived in the bottom one, and then the bottom floor, which was even with the outside world, and then she had a full basement. So and it was three bedrooms in her unit, and then the upstairs one was two, and then the top floor, I think, was also a separate two, and there was a common entranceway that, with a breezeway and everything, and a set of steps that went up to the other two apartments. But in any case, she had a job, and believe it or not, she actually was a seamstress. And you know what she was sewing? She was sewing parachutes for the Army. That's right. And an Italian Gran-mom was sewing parachutes for the 101st Airborne for the Army. And she was just sewing away, and she knew how to sew a parachute. And so she sewed God knows how many thousands of parachutes. And but she also, when that gig was up, she was sewing suits, and many of the suits that I wore when I went to church, because we had to go to church on Sunday. Our parents required us to go, and we went to several different churches until they chose which church they liked the most. But I can remember going to the Episcopalian church in Haddonfield, and I remember also going to a church called Christ the King, which is a Catholic church. But anyway, getting away from that and back to the good old funny story here. I asked my grandmother, Grandma, is there any way I can make a parachute so that I could jump off of the garage roof of the house in the yard and float to the ground? Because I wasn't a pilot, obviously, yet, but I was a kid, but I had my eyes looking at the birds flying through the air, and I wanted to figure out some way of flying. And she said, no, that's not the way it works. And she really didn't. My mom was like, no, don't give him any ideas, because Ben will figure out some way of getting in trouble. He'll make a pea shooter, or he'll make a something that would just end up getting him in trouble, or a potato launcher, or a slingshot, or a bow and arrow, or whatever. If he makes a parachute, he might jump off the top of the house and break his leg, but because she knew I was very creative, my mom, and so she warned my grandmother. But my grandmom had, in the basement, she had bolts of material, because she would sew shirts and even pants, and she would make jackets, like sport coats, and complete suits and dresses and everything. Well, she had this bolt of material that she didn't want. It was sort of silk-like, and it was golden color, and it was very thin and silk-like. And she taught me how to operate her Singer sewing machine, and I really wish I could remember how to operate the damn thing, because being into sailboating and everything. Every once in a while we rip a sail, and I forgot how to operate the thing. But when I was a young little kid, I was pretty good at operating that Singer sewing machine. Well, I sewed like a bat wing, and I bought two by fours, and or not 2x4s, and I'd sliced them thinner, so I made them into like 2x2s, so they'd be lighter. And then I sewed sleeves, and I slid the wood down the sleeves, and I made like what today would be called a hang glider. Can you imagine? And I must have been like in 7th grade, or I mean 7 years old or something like that. I was like in 2nd grade or something like that. And so I built this thing, and I couldn't get it. Once it was built, it was pretty big, and it was in the yard, and I could see my mom looking out the window. We had a huge yard. So she was looking out the window, and she was like, "Oh dear God, you know, what's he going to do? Is he going to jump?" And she knew there wasn't really any way I could get up onto the garage, because Dad had the ladder was locked away, and so I couldn't get up onto the roof of the garage. Otherwise, I would have jumped off the garage with this thing, because I had some faith in it that it would actually. I figured at the worst case scenario, it would break my fall. And I was very athletic when I was a kid. I was one of the fastest runners. I was the longest long jumper in my class. The hop, skip, and jump. I was the longest hop, skip, and jumper in my class. I was the fastest pedal bicycler, and later on we'll talk about that. I mean, they tried to draft me into the Olympics, by the way, later on in life, because I was so fast on a bicycle. No one could come close to catching me on a bicycle. I mean, I was really that fast. I'm not bragging or anything here. This is all fact. But at that time, I had my eyes set on figuring out some way of either jumping from some high up place and floating to the ground, or figuring out some way of taking off from the ground. But I would look up and see airplanes flying around, and I wanted to fly. And as strange as it may sound, at that time in my life, I was scared to death of heights. So even when I would like climb up a tree, you know, when you're a kid, you climb trees, and we had several trees on our property that were good for climbing, and so I climbed the tree, and I was scared to death that I would fall and break my leg or something. I definitely was afraid of heights. But on the other hand, I had a feeling that if I could figure out some way of flying, I wouldn't have to worry about falling, because I would be able to float. I don't know how even, you know, you could think of all this kind of things in my head, but this is true. I wanted to figure out a way of floating on the air, and so forth and so on. So Grandmom helped me to the extent that she gave me the material, and she taught me how to sew. So I sewed this thing together, and I never could figure out how to get up on the garage. So I remember running around the yard, hanging on to this like a bat wing or something, and trying to run up. I built a ramp out of wood and some cartons, like milk cartons or something, and jumping off and trying to float those couple of feet back down to the ground. But the damn thing just seemed like it was too heavy, and it was hard to run with because it was heavy, and frankly, I really don't think it would have done much to break my fall if I were able to climb up on some kind of a mountain ridge or something and jump off, and thank God I wasn't able to do that. But later on in life, I did buy a real hang glider, and I really did jump off of cliffs in West Virginia. Cliffs that were thousands of feet high, and I took training and so forth, and I became a hang glider, a real hang glider with a real, and I bought a real hang glider, a high-performance hang glider called a Bobcat 2, and I flew quite a bit on that thing until it was involved in a situation where it flew off the roof of the car on the way home from West Virginia on I-65, and it flipped off the roof of the car and hit the ground, and it got all scraped up, and I ended up selling it for pennies on the dollar because it was torn up, even though it was new. And I think that was God telling me, look, you know, you better knock it off or you're going to hurt yourself. But I used to love jumping off of mountains with that hang glider and floating around. And I got pretty good at it. I could stay up for like a half an hour at a time floating on updrafts and stuff. But getting back to the story here, I never really was able to build a parachute or a hang glider or anything myself. So I started to think out of the box. I'm thinking, maybe there's some other way I can fly. I mean, I just wanted to either fly or float or something that would get me off the ground. I mean, I was just mesmerized by looking at birds and just saying, look, they can fly, why shouldn't I be able to fly? I mean, I wanted wings bad. And but I never thought about becoming a pilot back in those days, but I still wanted to figure out a way of flying, and I wanted to do it myself. So I built a hovercraft. And the way I did it was I used plywood, very, very thin plywood. I used 2 4x8 sheets of plywood, and I put it together. So now I had an 8-foot by 8-foot square, and I put 2x4s around the edge so that would hold the air in. And I got a lawnmower engine off of my neighbor's lawnmower that they were throwing out, so the engine still worked. So I took the lawnmower engine, I cut a hole in the middle of the 8-foot by 8-foot square, and I mounted a Briggs & Stratton motor. And I remember looking around for a piece of metal that I hammered into the shape of a propeller, and then I bolted it to the bottom of the Briggs & Stratton motor, and I fired that sucker up, and I actually got this thing to lift off and float like about an inch, maybe an inch and a half off the ground. I mean, it was just floating along like an air hockey puck. And I put a seat in the middle right above the engine. It was very dangerous because if I'd have fallen right down into that spinning propeller blade that I made myself out of scrap metal by pounding it with a sledgehammer into the shape of a rough shape of a propeller. And I built this whole thing myself without any plans. Nobody told me how to do it. I just sort of concocted up a thing myself, and it, believe it or not, when I fired it up, it actually floated. It floated on the air, and when it got going and it lifted off, the amount of wind that it blew out the side was enough that it blew leaves. I mean, because I remember it was autumn, and the leaves were flying out the side of the thing, and you could sort of vacuum clean your lawn with this thing because it was like a giant air hockey puck floating around, and wherever it would go, it would blow all the leaves out of the way. But I didn't have any way of pushing it, so all I could do was sit on it and float up in the air. And it didn't take me too long to figure out that if somebody pushed on it, or if I tied a rope to it, like a rope to the bow of a boat or something, that someone could pull it, and and you could pull it like a dog, you could, or like a wagon, only it would be floating, and it was loud too, because I mean the engine had to run at full throttle for this thing to float. So here you're riding along, and the engine's going, and leaves are blowing out the side, and it's floating along, and I floated it around in the backyard until I got kind of bored of that, and then I thought, I'm going to take this thing out on the street and see what I could do. And my plan was to get it over to my friend's house, who lived about 8 or 9 blocks away, and he had another engine over there, and I was going to build like a tower on the back of this thing and build another propeller and have an engine that would push the thing forward, because my propeller and my engine lifted the thing off the ground. Now remember, I'm like only 7 years old and I built this thing. So the thing lifted up in the air, but I had no forward thrust whatsoever, and I had a little seat that you could sit on, and your friends could either push you or they could pull you, and you could whip yourself around the yard and float like an air hockey puck. And it was, I mean, then it would hit somebody in the ankle and injure them really bad, and then they'd run home screaming to Mom. And anyway, Mom was yelling at me that it was dangerous. She was afraid it was going to run over someone and the propeller was going to kill him. And so I had to get this thing out of my yard before my parents seized it and took it away from custody. Took it away from me. So I wanted to get over to my friend's house to put the propeller on the back so that I could cruise down. I'm envisioning riding down the road with this thing, you know, and being able to steer it and it going like 30 miles an hour. I mean, I was totally insane. Not insane, I mean, these are all doable things, and I was doing them, but anyway, so here's what happened that first day. It was like autumn, like around Halloween time, and I got the thing out of the yard, which was hard because there was a narrow space to get between the back steps of my parents' house, and there was a bush line of what are the name of those trees called, the yellow honeysuckle bushes, and there was just enough room to get between the steps of the side steps of the house and the honeysuckle bushes. So I motored on past there, and I had somebody pulling a rope that was tied to, you know, the front of the thing, and they had taking turns pulling me down the street, and I'm just sitting on the thing riding, and I wouldn't let anybody else ride it but me because I was afraid that, you know, if anybody got killed, I wanted to make sure it was me, and Mom wouldn't get too mad because it would just be me getting killed instead of the neighbor's kid. Because if you fell off the chair, you'd fall straight into the engine. There was no guard or anything. This propeller was just spinning, and you would just be sitting on this chair on a bunch of 2x4s. And if you fell off, or even if your foot slipped off and went down, your foot would have gone right into the propeller. It was just highly dangerous beyond belief, but nevertheless, I was doing it. So we got going down the road that I lived on, Overhill Road, which is like a no-traffic road. And it kept wanting to go, like there was a slight crown to the road, and I noticed right away that once I got it out on the highway, on the road rather, that it wanted to go downhill. And it never dawned on me that something that was floating like on a hockey puck type of situation, I'm thinking it's going to just, you know, go straight like a car. But I found out real fast that this thing wanted to go downhill. So now I'm thinking, wow, if I had a hill, I could ride it down the hill. And it just so happened that there was a pretty big hill between where I was and where I needed to go. So I had my slaves pull me to the top of this hill, which I had to go down. I had to go down the road anyway to get to where I was going. And this hill was like about a block long, and it was on like a 5-degree incline, or maybe a 6-degree incline, so it was a pretty decent hill. And I got going down this hill, and I mean, you wouldn't believe how fast this damn thing was going, because there's no friction. I mean, you're riding on a cushion of air, and I was just going down the hill. Oh, and the leaves were blowing. I mean, and everybody had just raked the leaves, because like once every couple of weeks in the autumn, the vacuum cleaning truck would come around and would vacuum the leaves up. But it was your job to rake your leaves and get them out to the street. Well, the vacuum cleaning truck was like due to come like the next day. So everybody had their leaves piled out in front of their house. And here I come down the road, and I'm blowing all the leaves back on the people's front lawn. And the noise that this thing was making, the neighbors were coming out and they were shaking their fists. What are you doing? What the hell is that thing? And it was just going, wah, because it was just, you just had to run it at full throttle so it would just stay floating in the air. And I'm riding on the thing, and I had several of my friends, you know, like pulling me around like slave boys. You know. And then when I got to the top of Hickory Lane, this road was called Hickory Lane, I'll never forget, and it was going down towards a road called Chews Landing, and it was downhill all the way to Chews Landing. And Chews Landing was like a 25-mile-an-hour road, and it had some traffic on it, and there was a crown, like a wicked crown on this road. So the road I was on, this Hickory Lane, didn't have much of a crown, so it wasn't that hard staying in the middle. But when I got to the bottom of Hickory Lane, I started picking up speed until I must have been going like 35 miles an hour by the time I got to the bottom of Hickory Lane, at the bottom of the hill. And then I hit the crown in the road, and there was a stop sign there, so I had to stop. And it was a T intersection, so I had to turn left or turn right. And I had no way of stopping the thing, and I just... First of all, I never thought it would go so freaking fast. So I got to the bottom of the hill, and it was like, wah! And I hit the curb, not the curb, but the crown, because I went the nose of the so-called hockey, let's call it a flying hockey puck or whatever that a human being could ride on. The nose of the thing dug into the crown of the cross street that was the T intersection that went up, and because it was crowned, it wasn't flying anymore. So the front end hit, and when it hit, the propeller that was very close to the ground level, the propeller was spinning at full. I mean, this Briggs and Stratton motor was like a 3.5 horsepower motor. It was like full horsepower, full throttle, and the propeller bottomed out when the nose of the thing hit the ground. The propeller hit the ground, and the propeller stopped suddenly, and the engine that was bolted to the propeller, it broke the engine bracket, which was nothing more than it was a bunch of 2x4s. The 2x4s broke, and the seat and everything, including me and the engine, and thank God the propeller, which had stopped, because thank God it had hit a big giant divot in the ground at Hickory Lane. Otherwise I would have had a spinning propeller. It could have killed me. But the engine just like shot up in the air, and the seat kind of went off to the side, and I can still remember seeing the engine like 7 or 8 feet up in the air with the propeller just maybe, you know, pretty much stopped, but kind of turning fast enough that it was kind of moving a little bit. And then it came back down and smash, and it landed right on the middle of the hockey puck thing, and the whole thing stopped flying at that point, because, well, I mean, if it had no propeller anymore and the engine stopped, it stopped flying. And when the engine came down, it landed, and this whole mechanism just stopped flying right in the middle of Choose Landing Road, which was a 25-mile-an-hour road, and all the cars were going back and forth, and it was like 5 o'clock in the night. Everybody was coming home from work, and all the traffic had to stop. And here I'm in this thing that was a hovercraft. It was flying perfectly normally, if you could call that flying normally. I mean, we were completely out of control, just floating down this hill and picking up speed to some, you know, uncontrollable crash at the bottom of the hill. Into the crown of the next road, and it landed on Hickory Lane right in the middle of the road, and it just kind of skidded to a stop with the engine like laying there. And it didn't take but about 5 minutes for the cops to come. So the police are like, okay, what the hell is this, you know? And they kind of knew me because they used to. Yeah, like from the ice cream truck fiasco. They never caught us or anything, but they used to keep an eye on the neighborhood after that, and did a marble cannon, and then we used to throw eggs at people's houses on Halloween and all. So, but anyway, they're like, Ben, what is this? And I said, well, it's a hovercraft. They said, well, what's a hovercraft? The police asked me, and I guess they must have known that I was kind of came from a scientific-based family or something, and they were very interested and sort of polite, and instead of just like shooting me, which of course police didn't do back in those days, they were curious just to see what I had invented. And I explained to them that I had flown this thing all the way from where I lived several blocks, and that I'd floated down Hickory Lane, and I picked up speed because it was like an air hockey puck, and it got going too fast, and I couldn't stop it, and it crashed when it hit the ground in the road on Choose Landing Road, and the propeller hit the ground, and the engine mount broke, and the motor and the propeller flew up into the sky, and it came back down, and the whole wreck was just laying there. So the cops were like, look, you got to get this thing off the road, you're blocking traffic. They didn't know what to do. The cops were like, you know, they didn't know if it was a motor vehicle. I said, well, if it floats, and they were like, well, it floats in the air. I said, yes. They said, so it wasn't touching the ground. I said, no, not until it crashed. So I guess they figured, well, it's not in our jurisdiction because it wasn't touching the road until it crashed. So as far as they were concerned, it was like a flying vehicle. So they didn't give me a ticket or anything. And they just said, look, we'll help you get it off the road. Is there any, you know, are you going to throw it away, or, you know, are you going to save the wood, or are you trying to? I said, I'm trying to get it to my friend's house so that we can make it better, because we're going to add another. And I explained to them we're going to add another motor. And the cops were like, really, really, really? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, cool. And they were like giving me the thumbs up. They're like, okay, well, the cops were kind of like, if this kid is that creative, let's leave him alone and see what he could do. So the cops were kind of cool about it, and they let us help me push it off to the side of the road, and they told traffic to get going, and then they just left. And they said, we're going to come back in about a half an hour. This thing better be gone, So my friend ran back to his house. One of the fellow whose house we were going to was with us. And he ran home as fast as he could, and thank God his dad was home, and his dad had a pickup truck, and his dad came running with the pickup truck. He came back with a pickup truck and helped us pick the whole mechanism up, and we put it in the truck, and he took it over to his house, and I never did put the other motor onto the thing. I mean, they had a motor there, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought that this thing was just too dangerous. I mean, I thought that hell, I could have been killed if the propeller had hit anybody or me, and I told my mom wanted to know what happened. And I think Jay, my neighbor, told my mom, and she kind of got a little hysterical. And so, anyway, the whole thing, I just left it over there at the Knight family. His name was Robbie Knight. And his father owned a real estate company called Farrell and Knight Realtors. But anyway, so I left it over at the Knight family. They probably used the wood to do a rehab job on a house or something. But just a funny story about me building a flying object. Maybe if I had a calm lake or something, that was flat, it wouldn't have picked up any speed. I could have floated on the water. That would have been kind of cool. But anyway. All right, listen, let's start talking about something serious now. That was just a little funny story about my childhood. I have an idea for campaign reform. I know Hillary Clinton wants campaign reform. I mean, we all want some way of campaign reform. Here's what I propose. I have an idea, and I haven't finalized my idea, but let me just throw this out there for you guys to munch on. To get on the ballot, you need to have so many signatures, and I forget how many it is, but I mean, you have to have a lot of signatures, and you have to have signatures in all the different places. I think we should just do away with that signatures all over the place, because I think if you have a certain number of signatures, I think that should be good enough to get you on the ballot. And you're going to be you're allowed to get these signatures through the internet, as was my understanding. So we're going to be using our website to be getting the signatures that I'm going to be needing. And what I think we ought to do is we need to just, if the Republicans want to do the Republican thing and the Democrats want to do the Democrat thing, that's all well and good, and they can nominate whoever they want or whatever. But my whole thing is, if anybody wants to get on the ballot, you don't have to be a Democrat or Republican. You can just be anybody. It's not going to go by party. You can call yourself a party or generate a party for purposes of running your operation or your organization to get you elected. But let's just say you're Ben Cola and you want to be independent, and you just want to run just you, and then maybe pick your buddy or whoever you want to be your to be your vice president. So what I propose is we do it this way. Instead of you going to vote in the primaries, where you're a Republican, you can only vote for, let's say, Ron Paul or John McCain, and maybe you got 2 or 3 people, and you vote, and you can't vote for a Democrat because you're a Republican. So you take the Republican primary and you vote for that. And the Democrat people, they take a Democrat one and then they vote for a Democrat. I say what you do is you have one group of people, and I'm talking about like a pack of 20 dudes or women, and each one only needs to get 1 million signatures. Now that's a lot. You need to get 1 million signatures. So if you get 1 million signatures, if you can garner 1 million signatures, then they would be required to put your name on the ballot, whether you had a party or not. Your name would be on the ballot, and we would have to make a decision about whether you had to choose who was going to be your running mate or not at that point. But either way, my point is, you get 1 million signatures, It could come through the internet. Everyone's signature has to be at least old enough to, how old do you have to be to vote now? 21 or is it 18? Okay, so you have to be a voting age, and so you sign the thing with your name, address, and email, you know, so it's like verifiable. And once you get 1 million of them, and they could be some in Florida, some in Colorado, some in Wilmington, Delaware, some in New Jersey, some
and
in...
they don't have to be registered voters.
Yeah, and they don't have to be, you don't have to get signatures in every state. Because you're talking about the national election here, it's just, you need 1 million people. It's going to be more like a popular vote. So you need 1 million people. Now let's just say, and we rig it up to the point where we're shooting to get 20 people on the primary ballot, like 20 men and women together, a group of 20, you know, runners who are going to be, and we're going to call that the primary. So if you're a Republican, you might have 5 Republicans running, and they call themselves Republican. As long as they get 1 million signatures, then they are going to be on the ballot. And then everyone in the United States is going to be able to vote in the primary for whoever they like out of the group of 20 people, who each one had 1 million votes. Then 2 months later, then out of those 20 people, the ones who get the most votes, you're going to pick 3 or 4 or 5. This is something we can iron out, but let's just say it's at least 3. I say we like pick 5 or 4, not just 2. It's not going to be 2 anymore. We're going to have like 5. So you're going to narrow the field from 20 people who got 1 million signatures each down to 5. And nobody is going to get any donation money. So Fox News, CNN, anybody who wants to run news or whatever, they're going to, the politicians are not going to be allowed to pay. It's going to be against the law for you to pay to run an ad. That way the oligarch can't get in there because he's got $1 billion and you don't. So you're not going to be allowed to spend your own money. All you have to do is get the 1 million votes. You're probably going to have a website, or you're not going to be able to get the votes. So then everyone gets to look at your website. There can be, if Fox News wants to hold a debate, they're going to have all 20 people, and they can have like a 3-hour debate with 20 people, or they can have a debate where it's a 2-night debate where they have 10 and then 10, and each person gets to talk for 15 minutes and then answer a couple of questions. But the point is, you want to get like 20 people nominated, and then 2 months later, without spending a penny, they're not going to be allowed to spend any money. It's against the law. It's just like in the insurance business. You're not allowed to buy a customer in the insurance business. That's called rebating. It is totally against the law. You're not allowed to give any of the commission back to the customer or to anybody else in an effort to get the customer. So everything is even Steven. So then what happens is 2 months later, without you spending any of your own money, and if Fox News, obviously they're going to want to have a part of this, because otherwise they're going to lose advertisers. People are going to turn the TV on. They're going to be like, who the hell's running for, who's going to be running? And if it's not on TV, if they don't want to put it on TV, they're going to lose business. They're going to lose advertisers, and then it can go totally off the internet and off the website. So the general public, who by the way is very hip to the internet, and they can just tune the TV off, forget the billions of dollars, forget the millions of dollars. The United States government doesn't have to put in any matching funds, because the government doesn't have any money to put in for matching funds anyway. So the whole thing is going to be free. And then what happens is you're going to narrow it down to 5 people, and then 2 months later you're going to have a final vote, and whoever gets the most amount of votes wins. It's as simple as that. And it could be a Democrat, it could be a Republican, it could be an independent, and nobody is allowed. You're not allowed to spend your own money except to open up your website and to get the, you got to get 1 million signatures. So you're obviously going to have to spend money to get the signatures. But I think once you get the website going, then getting the signatures, it shouldn't be all that big of a deal. And so that's it, and it won't cost anything, and that way you can get more people involved. You'll be able to get middle-class people, and it won't just be the same old people going around in circles getting reelected again, because they have the inside track. And the Republicans just passed a rule that said that if we don't know you and you don't have good name recognition, we're not going to let you be the nominee. So even if you get the most amount of votes, they're still, they put a law in place that said that they're not going to let you be the nominee. I mean, this is ridiculous. So I'm thinking to myself, look, I have to figure, if I'm going to run and I'm a member of the GOP, I'm not going to have a chance at all, because they're going to say I don't have star power, and since nobody knows who I am, I'm not going to have a chance of running for president. But if I have the million signatures, and the voters go to the websites and they can examine what each person has to say, and the news is going to interview these people, and I think they're going to start to separate the chaff, because they're going to see who the people are interested in, and they can hold straw votes or whatever, but that can all be network associated and without charge or cost to any of the candidates. And then, believe me, I can assure you, CNN and the major networks are going to pick this up, and they're going to follow it at their cost, and then the ordinary person won't have to pay billions of dollars, so he can get more airtime than the other guy, because it'll be against the law to spend money to put an ad on the television to run for president. And I think that's my idea. And you vote twice, just like you go to the primary and you vote, only you're going to be voting for one of the 20 people who has 1 million signatures, and then you're going to be voting again for one of the last 5, or maybe the last 4. And we have to decide on whether we want it to be the last 3, 5, or 4, or whatever, out of the 20 that started in the first place. That way you get the biggest pack to start off with, and then from there you narrow it down. And they're going to stand up there and they're going to say, well, I've got a Harvard degree, and I have this, and I have that, all these ideas. And then you ask them what their ideas are, and it turns out they've got all these degrees, but they're stupid. So anyway, that's my idea. And that way, anyone, and I was told this when I went to school, they said, one thing about America, you could come to America, you could come through Ellis Island, and you could be poor, but you can go to school, and you can be anything. You could be an astronaut, I guess, if you qualify. If you can get enough votes, you can be the president of the United States. But the way things are now, can you? Really? No. You really can't. This system's rigged. Now, my idea opens it up so that money will not be a factor. And it won't cost the U.S. government a penny, because they won't have to put any matching funds in. And if you take a version of my plan and you say, okay, after we have the primary vote where we vote on the 20 people and we narrow it down to a pack of 5, okay, maybe we can make a deal where the government kicks in $5 million, gives each one $5 million, and they're not allowed to spend more than that. That way, if somebody has $5 million and then they have another $10 million of their own money, they can't out-advertise you. But they do have some money to pay to put ads out. And maybe that would be an idea. But there has to be a certain amount of money, and the government would give the money as a grant to those last 5 people who are going to be on the final ballot.
Equal airtime.
And it would be a mandatory equal airtime, and each one would not be allowed to spend more than the amount of money that they have, and wouldn't be allowed to have any kind of tricks where they could get matching funds from somewhere else. So if they put up $5 million, someone else will put up $5 million. No tricks. No, there's no hooks or tricks to it.
Can't
it's just
charge one candidate.
yeah, the Fox News and CNN can't charge one candidate more for airtime than the other. Thereby, if they favor somebody, they can't say, well, we're going to give you 10 times the airtime for the same price. Therefore, you're not violating the $5 million max that you're allowed to pay for. No. Everything it's got to be auditable, and it has to be you know, everybody has to be able to spend the same. It's either going to be they get nothing and they're not allowed to spend their own money, or they're going to get something, maybe $5 million each. So, all right, so the government kicks in $5 million each to see who the president's going to be, and then that way, all men are truly created equal, and the cream will rise to the top, and you're going to completely do away with the oligarchy that's in power now. It's just money. And with the money that these people have, they're buying the election. And I think that everyone in the United States who is old enough to have seen several elections knows that these elections they're bought. You don't get to become the president unless you're buying your way in. Now, you may be more electable than the next guy, but he also bought his way in to the point where he got to the point where he was allowed to challenge you. I mean, the bottom line is, when it gets down to the last couple of guys, the Democrat and Republican going for it, they're both millionaires, and they always were millionaires. My idea is anybody who can get a million signatures can get on the primary, and then if they get a substantial number of votes, then they can be in the group of the last 5 or the last 3 or whatever we decide, and they're not, one is not allowed to spend more money than the other. And it could even make a law that says that Fox News and CNN and any television channel is not allowed to charge more than so many dollars a minute, and there has to be a law that says it's the same amount of airtime regardless of the cost. But it has to be some kind of system where there is guaranteed fairness. So even if you were the owner of Fox News, you couldn't just put yourself on there and say, well, I didn't spend more than $5 million, but because you're the VP for Fox News, you were the only one that was on the television for the last 2 months. And there would only be a 2-month, decision period. So between the primary, where you're voting on the 20 people, and you're narrowing it down to 5, and then each one of them gets $5 million, let's say, from the government, from that moment to the final presidential vote is a 2-month period. And I think there should be some kind of a law that says everybody is required to vote. And if you don't vote, and you have a voters, you have the right to vote, I think that you should be penalized somehow. In Australia, they charge, if you don't vote, if you don't show up and vote, you get a $50 fine. But I don't think that you should only have 1 day to vote. I think you should have like 3 days to vote, or it should be like a 3-day weekend or something. Because, I mean, just like, you know, suppose you have to work on Tuesday or whatever, the day of the vote, and there's just no way you can make it. You're busy. It should be like a 3-day window that you can vote anytime during those 3 days. But if you don't vote, there's a $50 penalty. And it comes off as a tax penalty or something like that, or you get a pink ticket in the mail, $50 you have to pay, and you got 30 days to pay it. Otherwise, something, you know, something bad happens to your credit report or something. So because we need to get everybody participating in these votes. And now, if you don't want to vote, don't sign up to vote. But if you are signed up to vote, you're going to be required to vote. It's as simple as that. And maybe you could even make it where if you have a driver's license, you know, you're required to vote. And it wouldn't be a pain because you'd have 3 days. I mean, you're going to have 3 days, so it's not going to be like a hassle. And I think you should be able to vote like through the ATM machine at the bank. You shouldn't have to necessarily show up at your precinct. If you can withdraw $500 out of an ATM machine, I don't know why you can't put your ATM card in there and it just said, during the 3 days while the vote's going, as long as you show up at the ATM machine during the 3 days, you could just vote through the ATM machine. Because if the ATM machine is secure enough to give you $300 or $400 or $500 cash, I sure as hell would think that the ATM machine could keep a vote square. I mean, I trust it. If it's going to dispense cash to you, I think I'd trust it. And but it would have to be. I still would want the thing to be audited by the absolute experts to make sure that the system is absolutely clean and there wasn't any monkey business going on where somebody has some kind of connection to the Central Intelligence Agency or something. But so the idea is to get greater participation in who votes. I mean, the laws that we're making today are just so preposterous. I mean, why not make a law that says, look, you have to vote? So we get everybody voting. So everybody is going to have to put your opinion in. And number one. And number two, you know, why should it be that the millionaire, that the guy who has $1 billion in the bank can hog up all the airtime because he's got the money to do so? Now there has to be a limit where everybody is either granted $5 million from the government or granted nothing from the government and isn't allowed to spend any of his own money, and any airtime he gets he's going to have to talk the networks into giving it to him. And maybe the networks have to give you airtime. They can make a rule that just says, look, I mean, they have a license that's worth, you know, potentially $1 billion. I think that maybe the government could just make a rule that just says, you know, you have to give each candidate, you know, so many airtime spots or something. I'm not talking maybe about in the primaries, but I'm talking about the final, you know, when it comes down to voting for the final 3, 4, or 5 guys for the final vote for that 2-month period, because that's where the focus is going to be, on that 2-month period. So that's my idea. And now, before I go, I see I've got a little more time here. I just want to talk about the basics again. We are going to do what? We are only going to vote for oath keepers. We are not going to vote existing politicians back in for another term. They are all going to be voted out. No more same guy, same guy. The existing guys are all going out. We're going to get some all new, complete new blood transfusion here into our government. And only if they're an oath keeper are they allowed to be voted in. Do not vote for anyone for Congress, Senate, or President unless they're an oath keeper. And every congressman and every senator who's in there now, as far as I'm concerned, has earned an F for flunky, because that's where we're at right now. They flunked out. They have sold us out, and they have flunked out. And we will not re-elect these people. And so, have to be an oath keeper. Do not vote the same person in. Oh, or their brothers, wives, or family members, or if you know they're close and related or friends of the same. Because otherwise, you're going to have the oligarchs coming back in, and you're going to get you're going to get the same old crap again. Remember, these people are coming into office not because they want to get a $170,000 a year congressional job. They're coming into this job because they want to become billionaires. Yep. And with the insider trading that they're allowed to do, which by the way we're going to do away with, and all the other perks they have, they're in a position where they can earn huge amounts of money off of government contracts, and because they're in a position to know ahead of time what's going to happen. That's why they have no ban on insider trading, because in order to get that, they said, well, look, there's no way we cannot know what's going on, so therefore we could always get in trouble even if we own a mutual fund, because no matter what we do, we know what we're going to vote for, and so therefore if we own a mutual fund, we have exposure to every stock there is, so no matter what we do, we're going to be insider trading. So that's how they made that argument in the first place, to enable them to have insider trading. And Obamacare, look folks, you need an expert like me to redo that thing. We need to have more of a Canadian style system. It's not going to cost you anything. And it's not going to pay for your doctor visit. I mean, come on, you know.
If it's so good, why doesn't Congress have it?
You know, you're going to pay for your own doctor, and you're going to choose your own doctor, and no one's going to tell you who your doctor is going to be. Your doctor is the cheapest part of the whole thing. I mean, why don't you want to pay your own doctor? So you pay the doctor, you lighten up the doctor's paperwork load. The doctor won't charge that much if you pay the doctor in cash, or stroke them a check, or give them your MasterCard. Instead of paying a premium, because you're not going to have any premium to pay, you pay the doctor, and the doctor will be happy. And then the doctor will write you your prescription, and then you go and you're gonna have insurance to fill your prescription. And you're going to have insurance to fill if you have to land in the hospital or something. So that's the way that's going to work. And if you need any kind of services that are not included in the basic contract that you're going to have in our Americanized Canadian version, it's an Americanized version of the Canadian system, you'll always be able to go out of network and pay another doctor or have a second opinion, and the system will not stop you from filling a prescription written by a second doctor with a second opinion or treating you differently, because I believe in you being treated the way you want to be treated, and there might be 5 or 6 ways of treating whatever ailment you have, and you shouldn't have to be forced to take a doctor that's forced on you by the insurance company, who was really given to you by the governments, and now the government's forcing you to go to a doctor that they hoist on you, and a doctor who, by the way, they order not to tell you that you've been exposed to nuclear radiation from Fukushima because, oh, well, that's a secret. And by the way, it is.
License.
So you can go to your own doctor, and the government's not going to tell you what doctor to go to, but when you go to fill those prescriptions, they have to pay for them, whether they like them or not. And by the way, refills, screw this. You have to see the doctor every month, and you can't get refills on your medicine. And I'm talking about every class of medication there is. A lot of people are on medication where they're on maintenance, and the doctor will refill that thing 6 times because the doctor knows that you're going to be on that medicine from now until next year, or from now until the day you die. Why should you have to go to the doctor every month? Like the new DEA wants you to go to the doctor every month to fill de minimis pain medication that they just jacked the class 3 minor pain medications all the way up to a class 2, the same as morphine and heroin. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You'd be able to get as many refills as you want, and the doctor would put on there, instead of having a maximum of 5 refills, that's you fill it once and then plus 5 refills for 6 refills, the doctor could put on there, refill until I tell you to stop. Then what would your doctor bill be? Your doctor bill would go all the way down because you wouldn't have to see the doctor so much. Now, you'd have to pay the doctor bill because I'm saying you're not going to have insurance coverage for the doctor bill. But your doctor, if it's a specialist, you'll have coverage. But your GP, you're going to have to pay your own GP. But if it's a specialist, then you're going to pay. And you'll have coverage for eyes, and you'll have coverage for specialists and stuff like that. And teeth too, by the way. We don't want people with bad teeth. So you're going to have dental as well. And it's all going to be covered. But your regular GP is going to be chosen by you, and you're going to pay for that yourself. And that way it lightens up the doctor's load so they don't have to fill in 1,000,000 tons of paperwork in order to get paid. So going to have some mercy on the doctors. And by the way, if the pharmacy doesn't want to fill your prescription, they're going to be thrown in prison for a couple of years. Because if a doctor writes a prescription and a pharmacist tries to second guess it or something, they're going to go down. And there's going to be like a 2-year jail term for that, and they're going to have their license revoked. You know, none of this bullshit with the pharmacist saying, oh, I think you're getting too much medicine, or I think you need to. They are a pharmacist. They're not a doctor. Okay? None of this second-guessing crap. That's another problem we have with this country. Everything's second-guessing. You got too many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody's an Indian chief, and nobody's a worker. The doctor has good, clean credentials. The doctor worked hard to get where the doctor is. The doctor writes the prescription. And look, if the doctor starts doing bad, what will happen is people will get sick. They're going to hire attorneys. Lawsuits will ensue. And they'll end up getting exposed in the end anyway. Other than that, the government stays out of it. The doctor writes a prescription. The pharmacist better shut the F up and fill it. And the doctor can write a prescription that says, like in the case of my medicine I have to have for my thyroid, it'll just say fill forever. Fill until I tell you to stop. And I won't have to get back to the doctor. Now the doctor's going to say, well, every year I want to check you because I might have to increase or decrease the levels, because as you get older, the amount of thyroxine you may need, or Synthroid, or whatever it is that you're on, may change because your body weight might change or something like that. So the doctor might not be willing to give you more than 12 refills. But you'd be allowed to get a lot of refills, as many as the doctor felt comfortable with. The DEA is not going to be in any position to tell the doctor what to do, or you can only give so many refills. Screw that. Washington is dictating too much policy to us. They can go stick it. We don't need them. Okay, folks. And by the way, you want to smoke pot instead? Have a nice day. You smoke all the pot you want. You want to get your medicine from Afghanistan, or you want to buy your prescriptions from the pharmacy of China? Go right ahead. You can buy it from the pharmacy of China if it's cheaper or it has lower copay. I don't care. Washington is not going to tell you where to buy your medicine, and we're not going to tell you who to go for your doctor, but you're going to pay for your own doctor. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, look, I hate to have to hit you up again, folks, but please, look, just PayPal me. Send it in, and just do it as a gift for now, okay? Just go to the PayPal account and PayPal Benjamin Cola a gift, whatever you can help me with. Really, it can be as little as $5 or $1 or a couple of bucks, or if you could do $100, I mean, that's great. Look, I appreciate everything and anything that you can do for me, honestly, and I just can't thank you enough, folks. Thanks a lot for listening to me and considering me. Have a nice night.